Hello everyone, my name is PJ and welcome back to The Void. Today we're continuing the story of the Hoarder. In the last session, Surge was killed by a bunch of giant wolf spiders that I should not have sicked on them in the first place, and we have since agreed as a group, via vote, to not have status quo encounters in the wilderness anymore. There will still be higher level enemies in the world, but they won't be immediately hostile to the players, and the players will only have to fight them if they're the ones who engage. So after Surge died, and I mentioned this in the previous session, a drow druid came out from the webbing, parted the spiders, and brought him back to life using a web-flavored version of Revivify. Now Surge's maximum speed has been permanently reduced, and he feels like he's covered in web all the time. Now, we couldn't really get a good reaction from Surge's character from this because Surge's player was absent this session. So we won't really be discussing Surge or his activity for the rest of the video. Instead, it was the rest of the party who decided to question this enigmatic drow. She explains that she was originally just going to let the spiders eat Surge, circle of life and all that, but she saw how brave he was when he used this dying action to save his friends. So she decided to give him another chance and also put him in debt to her. She knows a way to fully restore him without all the web making up his insides. She knows a cleric, but she will not tell them where this cleric is or give them her name until they do her a favor. Since she is part of a circle of druids called the Ring of Swords, who is dedicated to weeding out orcs and gnolls, they don't have time to deal with these zombies that have suddenly started rising out of the swamp at the base of the Sunless Citadel. So she tells them to go there and figure out what's causing the zombies and to stop it, and then to meet her at her druid camp, which she gives them directions to all of these places, and then she will tell them where Surge can get fully restored. But they don't have time to do that. They're on a time limit to get the crystal rod. So they decide to put that little side quest on the back burner and return to the goblin caves. Now, when they get there, the goblins have regrouped. They have little wooden palisades set up by the cave entrance, and that makes dealing with them way more difficult this time around. Every single time the players step out from behind the trees in order to get close enough to shoot without disadvantage, the goblins use their readied actions to fire at whoever stepped out. So every single time one of them steps out, they're getting pelted by 3 arrows. The goblin jester is there too again, by the way, and as soon as he realizes that the players are back, he runs into the cave in order to start warning everybody. So the players have a dilemma. The palisades are granting the goblins an extra +5 bonus to their armor classes, giving them an effective total of 18. They can't really hit them very well, and every time they try, they all get shot at. So they come up with a plan. With Zaymot leading the line with his shield up and constantly taking the dodge action, only moving 25 feet at a time since he's a dwarf, the other two stay behind him and gain the benefits of half cover from Zaymot. So that makes them a bit harder to hit. It doesn't make them immune to getting hit, they still get hit on occasion, but they make it so that they can approach safer. Not perfectly safe, but safer, which is pretty much the best option they probably could have come up with. Once they get close enough, Zaymot uses his new command spell on one of the goblins and told her to approach. She comes out from behind hiding, and when she does, Chit and Balthazar use their readied actions to attack her, and she goes down. The other 2 goblins decide that they're going to cut their losses given how close the heroes are, and try to flee. They don't get far. The others manage to shoot them down, or sacred flame one of them down, as in Zaymot's case, before they're able to escape. So all the goblin archers are taken out, but the jester, once again, gets away. They re-enter the cave, and they're being very careful about searching for traps this time, because they're already predicting that the goblins are going to have new traps set up. And new traps they did. For you see, Chit used his 10-foot pole to scoot the stone camouflaged curtain aside in order to look behind it, and it's a good thing they did instead of just walking right through, because Balthazar's bear trap that he left behind in the previous session, the goblins have it set up just behind the curtain. So Balthazar is able to get his bear trap back, and they decide to go down the secret passage, the narrow one, instead of going through the hall with all the traps. Probably the way better option, because secretly there are new traps in that hallway. But they never went that way, so it doesn't matter. So they get to the little room that Surge saw before, with the goblin guards, hanging out at the table and playing cards and stuff. They're not there this time. The room is empty. Instead, when they approach, they find that the door at the end of the hallway has this little slit in the doorway, kind of like an eye hole, that only opens from the other side. It slides open. You know, like the kind you see in movies where they slide it open to ask people, what's the password, and stuff like that. But they can't open it from this side. They have no idea what the slot is for, so Zaymot decides that he's going to cover it up with his shield, and then attempt to use the doorknob. He turns the knob, but it doesn't open. But then he can't take his hand off of the knob because it was covered in glue. And when he tries to pull the knob away from the door, he finds that it's connected to a string. And when he pulls the string, they hear a whole bunch of bells going off in the other room. They had set an alarm. Zaymot can hear the slot in the door open up. The goblins have absolutely no idea why they can't see out the door, because there's this big shield blocking the way. So after a while of trying to discuss what to do, the goblins get a hand axe, and they start chopping away through the slot trying to get rid of whatever's blocking it. Zaymot's shield takes quite a bit of damage, and I start tracking its hit points. It takes 7 damage out of a total of 10, which is about how much a small, resilient item should have in hit points. Zaymot takes his shield down, and everybody hides in the blind spots around the door, with Balthazar and Chit being to the side, and Zaymot being on the ground beneath the slot. The goblins can't see anybody out there, but they know someone is there. So the one goblin takes the hand axe and slips it through the slot and starts swinging it around, trying to find whatever's there. Bad move. Chit lobs his arm off. And now there's an arm grasping a hand axe laying on the ground, while they hear the screams of a male goblin coming from the other room. Balthazar decides that enough is enough. This is a perfect distraction, so he kicks down the door. And when he does, once again, all the goblins inside with their readied actions fire at him. Luckily, not nearly as many hit him this time, because he's prepared for goblins, and he's got a torch out, so he can see, so they don't get advantage on their attacks. The jester is inside taunting them once again, and decides instead of sticking around to fight, considering that the heroes are in a way better position this time, he immediately goes through another door and shuts it. Now the players make note that the jester did not touch the knob with his bare hand. He put his hand in his cape in order to touch it, and then he opened it. So after the jester shuts the door behind him, the heroes resume dealing with the goblins that are currently in the room. Chit runs up to the line of goblins that are hiding behind a bunch of clothing chests, and he cleaves right through a whole bunch of them. And then Balthazar comes along and cleaves through the rest. They also deal with the handless goblin, so every goblin in the room right now is dead. So the party is feeling pretty good right now. They've killed every single goblin they've encountered, and the jester just keeps running away from them. So, using the same method that the jester used, they grab some clothes from the nearby chests and use those to touch the doorknob. They feel that the doorknob is very warm, and for good reason. They turn the knob and open it up, and a huge wave of heat blasts them in the face. In the opposite room is a long cave tunnel full of dwarven ruins, with a river of lava flowing right down the middle of it. They cautiously enter the room and cross a bridge to the other side. Chit can hear growling, so they all make some preparations. Chit decides to get behind a wall and hide. Then the other two, Balthazar and Zaymot, decide to make a bunch of noise in order to lure out whatever they're hearing. A warg bursts out from behind the wall that Chit was hiding behind and attacks Balthazar and Zaymot, but then Chit bursts out from hiding and surprises the warg. Combat starts, and the warg is surprised. But not the other warg. There is another warg hiding behind some ruins on the other side of the river who runs out with a goblin archer riding on its back, who fires at the heroes when they emerge from hiding and then immediately run back behind cover. Since the warg is surprised and can't do anything, the heroes manage to take it out pretty quickly. They also manage to take out the goblin archer pretty quickly, and then the warg abandons it and leaps over the lava river in order to do battle with the heroes itself. Instead of attacking it, Chit decides that he's going to grapple the warg. He grabs it by the fat of his neck and starts slowly dragging it over to the river of lava. Balthazar runs in order to help, by trying to shove it into the lava or assist in grappling it, but nothing works. The warg is very strong and is able to resist most of their attempts to push it, and eventually it escapes from Chit's grapple, and having been weakened a lot by now by Zaymot's spells, it decides to try and run away. Everybody chases after it, but it still manages to get away. Everybody's opportunity attacks miss. It runs into a nearby room that is blocked off by a big cloth curtain in order to keep the heat from getting in. The heroes hear some shrieks from the inside and speech in a language that none of them know. If Surge were there, he probably could have translated, but he wasn't. They wait for a while and nobody comes out. So Zaymot decides to throw Balthazar's torch, that they no longer need since the room is brightly lit by the lava, over at the curtain. The curtain catches on fire, and they wait for a while, but still nothing happens. Now, what's actually happening that the PCs never learned is that the goblins are simply waiting. They have taken cover, and they've got their bows drawn, and they're waiting until a target comes into view so that they can just fire at them. They're not going to come out. The PCs have no idea what's in store for them, so instead of attacking or taking the initiative, they retreat. Very wise decision. They go back to the barracks, and they blockade all of the doors with bunk beds, and they take a short rest. Toward the end of the short rest, they can hear somebody trying to get in, but they can't because it's barricaded, and after a few seconds they give up, and they don't hear back from them for the remainder of the rest. Once everybody is back in shape, they move the bunk bed out of the way and return to the cave of the lava river. They go to the room that had the curtain that they burned away and find that it is devoid of life. All the goblins that were inside have fled, now that the coast was clear. Inside this room is a forge. There's a big furnace with a bellows and a lot of little tables for crafters of all kinds. There are whetstones and recently repaired weapons and bows and such. But the only things of particular note in this room are a free set of smith's tools, which Chit takes because as soon as he hits level 3, he's going to get proficiency in smith's tools, and then he'll be able to craft his bullets, and a small marble statuette of a red dragon decorated in red rubies, which they pocket because they realize how valuable it is. This doesn't happen until later, but they also grab a whetstone from this room, the only whetstone remaining in it, in order to repair 1 hit point of Zaymot's shield, which is something that I personally allow whetstones to do, is to restore 1 hit point to metal equipment, just because otherwise they're completely useless and they have no mechanics. So since the goblins are all gone, the heroes continue following the lava river until they come to the end of the tunnel. On the right side of the lava river is a door built into the wall. It is a perfectly normal, not even reinforced door, it's not booby-trapped, and the handle isn't even that hot. So Zaymot takes the lead and opens it up. Inside, the lava river continues, and there's 2 sections of land. A small section on the left with a makeshift throne with purple cushions, behind which is another tunnel blocked off by an iron gate, and to the right is a large alcove with a huge pile of treasure. Thousands and thousands of coins. Chit, as soon as he comes into the room, can hear snickering from the left, growling and footsteps coming from the right. He hears coins rattling around. Balthazar immediately deduces that there are goblins hiding either inside or directly behind the pile of coins, and uses his lightning breath on it. Now, they told me that gold conducts electricity, and I have not looked that up yet, but more than one person said that it does, so I believe them. I'm going to look that up later. But it shocks the entire pile of gold coins and kills not only the wounded warg that got away earlier, but also the goblin's one and only caster. The Booyog caster that I was going to have cast sleep on the party. So they don't have to deal with that. Although the caster, she does drop a heavy crossbow, and when she does, they can hear someone scream, "Ow!" It takes them a few seconds to figure out what made that noise. But as for the other goblin archers and the one goblin blacksmith that escaped from the forge earlier, they all take half damage from the lightning breath because they all made their saves. Now, while this is all happening, from behind the throne steps out a large, not size category large, but a particularly buff and battle-scarred goblin, the goblin boss, alongside the jester. Balthazar locks eyes with him. He recognizes him. He says, "You." And the goblin boss looks back at him and says, "Well, well. My jester told me there was a blue dragonborn among the intruders, but I had no idea it would be one so stupid as to come back here." The goblin boss's name is Grimgar, and he is the one who dealt the mortal blow to Zaka, Balthazar's former lover. Combat starts. As the combat rages on, Grimgar and Balthazar continue to converse, and the party learns that the Booyog caster is actually Grimgar's concubine named Zilpha, who is now dead. Not that he cares. He doesn't really care about any of his minions. They're just minions. And as you'll soon learn, he doesn't really care about sacrificing them either. And the jester's name is Snickwix. Another warg, only mildly damaged by the lightning breath from before, emerges from behind the treasure hoard and begins doing battle with Zaymot. Meanwhile, Grimgar and Snickwix are using ranged weapons against him. Zaymot takes quite a bit of damage, as he is pretty much everyone's sole target right now. Chit runs over to the treasure hoard and starts lobbing off goblin heads. That since the goblin archers are already wounded, he can't use cleave against them. Balthazar rages, and he jumps over the lava river in order to get to Grimgar. He's not concerning himself with much else. But when he attempts to attack Grimgar, Grimgar uses his special goblin boss ability to swap places with Snickwix. And that's when Balthazar not only crits, but also manages to overcome the jester's special ability, which this jester is called a dum-dum goblin, by the way, and it has an ability that makes it so that whenever you want to attack it, you need to make an additional DC 15 dexterity check in order to hit it at all. Balthazar beats both of those rolls, and he bisects the jester perfectly vertically, causing the jester's hat to fly off. While this is all happening, there is one surviving goblin archer who throws down her bow, disengages, and dashes away, trying to get to the iron gate on the other side of the river. While Chit goes over to help Zaymot deal with the warg, Grimgar decides to use this opportunity to take the one remaining goblin minion of his hostage. He goes over to her and he grabs her in order to keep her from running away. Then, after Zaymot finishes dealing with the warg, Chit joins Balthazar on the other side of the river and tries to shoot at Grimgar. But he uses his ability again. He picks up the goblin archer and she gets shot in the face by the crossbow bolt and she dies. He then casually tosses her body to the side. Now, the goblin boss had absolutely zero confidence in his minions, and he's still at full health and still feeling pretty tough, especially since he'd defeated Balthazar before. Balthazar runs up to him, and he rolls a very high amount of damage. Have I ever mentioned that Balthazar has 19 strength, and is currently raging, and is currently two-handing a battle axe? He cuts through the goblin boss so hard that it actually manages to damage his chain shirt. The goblin boss is almost dead from a single hit. The goblin boss, Grimgar, realizes that he's in way over his head and decides that as soon as his next turn comes around, he's going to chug the potion of greater healing that he's got and retreat to the Iron Gate. Zaymot doesn't let it happen. Zaymot goes around the river, crosses the bridge, and caves Grimgar's skull in. The party is victorious. Every single goblin and warg in the entire dungeon is dead. None of them escaped. The party begins checking out the treasure, including the heavy crossbow that the Booyah caster dropped earlier. As they near it, they hear a voice coming from somewhere. It says, "Hello? Who's there?" They pick up the crossbow. They realize that it is talking to them. They ask it a bunch of questions, because by now they've noticed that the crystal rod they came looking for is not among the treasure, nor is it on Grimgar's person. When they ask him about the crystal rod, the crossbow becomes irritated. He says, "Crystal rod? Why does everybody keep mispronouncing my name? I'm Grizzle Todd, the most feared vampire captain in all the astral plane." Everybody in the party is exasperated. They came here looking for a crystal rod, but it was actually Grizzle Todd that everybody had simply been mishearing and misspeaking. Language barriers and all that. Chit begins speaking to the crossbow, to Grizzle Todd, and it asks him, "Who am I speaking to? I can't see anything. I don't have eyes." And Chit tells him his name. He tells him his name is Archibald Stromkin. "Stromkin? Ye yellow-bellied git! Would ye be happen to be related to Salvador Stromkin? He's the one who put me in this damned thing." And Chit is surprised. He asks, "When did he do that? I'm pretty sure he's dead." And he tells him, "Dead? Well, you're not completely wrong about that. But after we crash-landed on this rock, Salvador's the one who put me in this crossbow, and I have no idea where he's been since. I've been in the hands of a very irritable goblin lass for the last several years." Chit asks him what he means by Salvador not being quite dead. Grizzletodd responds, "He was a pirate, lad. A space pirate. You know what happens when a space pirate refuses to die, don't ye?" So here Chit is, holding what remains of the vampire captain that sunk the highwayman in the first place. Grizzletodd also goes on to explain, after they ask more about the crystal rod and why they need it in order to repair the highwayman, that they heard about it from the Skull Crushers, who are being led by a warlock that serves something called the Hoarder. And he explains to them, "The Hoarder? Well, you're in luck, lad. I happen to be working for the Hoarder myself. So, you see, we can cooperate. I can tell you what you've been needing to know, and you can get me out of this blasted crossbow." Grizzletodd goes on to explain that since he is a sentient magic item, he is granting it all kinds of magical powers apart from just being able to talk. He can make whoever attunes to it immune to a whole mess of stuff, including cold damage, necrotic damage, charm, and even exhaustion. It's a very powerful magic item, but you have to attune to it, and all of the characters are wary of doing so, because Grizzletodd says he's not going to cooperate unless they do exactly what he says. So, ignoring Grizzle Todd for now, the party decides to focus on the treasure. They find a couple of potions, including the potion of greater healing that Grimgar didn't get to use. They find a scroll and a bunch of gems. But then they also find lots and lots of coins. Over 2,000 copper pieces, which they are not carrying. That is a lot of weight even for Chit. So they put the copper aside, and they take all of the silver, which is a few hundred pieces of silver, and the few pieces of gold that are actually in the pile. As for the copper pieces, Zaymot comes up with the idea of sacrificing it all to his god Bahamut. He pours all the copper into the river of lava, and Chit helps, and so does Balthazar, and they all pray to their respective gods. Zaymot and Balthazar both to Bahamut, and Chit to Shandakor. When they do, I decide that their respective gods look down on them and decide to reward them with charms of heroism. Now, one time and one time only, as an action, they can grant themselves the benefits of a potion of heroism, which basically gives them 10 temporary hit points that last for an hour. And once they use it, it's gone forever, until they get another charm. I've always wanted to use charms and blessings, but I never really found the opportunity to do so, and this seemed like a great opportunity to do so. So, in short, the quest for the crystal rod turned up a dead end. But they now have a sentient heavy crossbow who knows about the Hoarder, and also knows things about Salvador and the Skull Crushers, and knows a lot of stuff. But it's not going to tell them anything that they want to know until they do what it asks. And what it wants happens to be the same exact thing that Chit wants. To kill Salvador once and for all.